what you realize is people that you love that you gonna have to leave behind. I was told, wow, look, we at war, we at war. Everybody can't go there. Some of us vibing high. Everybody can't go there. Some of y'all might leave family behind. Everybody can't go there. Could have completed, but you get deleted. Some people are defeated, so you feel deleted. And knowledge is medicine, knowing you need it. If everyone go, I'ma know that you cheated. You think I'm conceited, I'm feeling completed. Life is a game and I'm planning to beat it. Life is a game and I'm planning to beat it. Everybody can't go, don't beat it. You was ascending and starting to win. No pretending, actually win. Low vibrations, boxing you in. Who keep letting them toxins in? All my people are toxin us. Everyone on our toxin land. Ancient like cosmology. I am the source, I go within. I can't go unless I go to win. Really a God supposed to win. Anyone that's trying to get with me, just start doing the most you in. Trying to turn up, it goes to 10. Blood type O, you almost in. And knocking, we all go in. G, I'm a rule, we all go in. Bring me the water, but can't make you drink. No, I'm not here to just make you think. If anything, I'm here to just make you fight. It's all us, just make you hurt. Everybody ain't with it. Let me tell you, I don't like reading. Freedom ain't free, you broke, I get it. Let me tell you, you don't like breathing. Can't even wake you up, be sleeping. Niggas are sleeping, scalping senses. Some of y'all sleep through all the trees. Ain't government beefing, now you vegan. Need autonomy, really don't need them. Now we rock this house is freedom. Really gonna hurt my heart to leave them. Really gonna hurt my heart to leave them. This is simulation or a cycle. They be hating on you for survival. That's why I don't mess with the Bible. Ain't nobody try to go on viral. We original, we hold the title. Lot of work to do, how you idle. Ain't no false idols in they bio. We ancient for ancient in Ohio. Say what you want and do what you do. And I'm starting to get, I don't know about you. Gotta go with think, can't go on YouTube. If you think you know, you ain't got no clue. Say what you want and do what you do. But I'm starting to get it, I don't know if you do. Gotta go with think, can't go on YouTube. If you thinking you know, you ain't got no clue. War, we at war. Everybody can't go there. Some of us vibing high. Everybody can't go there. Some of y'all might leave family behind. Everybody can't go there. Could have completed, but you get deleted. Some people are defeated, so you feel deleted. And knowledge is medicine, knowing you need it. If everyone go, I'ma know that you cheated. You think I'm conceited, I'm feeling completed. Life is a game and I'm planning to beat it. Life is a game and I'm planning to beat it. Gotta be it. Everybody can't go, don't beat it. Everybody ain't ready. Everybody don't know what's going on right now. Some of them still trapped in the matrix. That's what's up, bro. So appreciate the support of the real ones, for real, for real. We about to get into some info, guys, real quick. It depends on how much we read it is. I want to get into something else, but I didn't want to put it in the title. But it is in pertaining to you, of course. What's important? Shit, what's the only thing important around here? You. Let's go.
Assessment of country for pastoral occupation was also a major consideration in Leichhardt's journeys. Of the southwest of Queensland, he noted, considering the long and precarious land carriage, and the high rate of wages. Particularly on stations so remote, I do not believe that sheep farming would pay even so far back as the Horse Track River. Cattle stations might be formed perhaps, even as far back as the Maranoa, which at Camp 80 of Sir Thomas Mitchell, would be very eligible for that purpose. Point 53. The image of explorers traversing large tracts of unknown country in their quest for suitable pastoral land is, however, quite erroneous. These men made extensive use of existing Aboriginal tracks and trails. On his Bell End and Kerr expedition, Archibald Meston descended 700 feet along a small old blacks track leading down a very steep descent into the junction of two creeks. 54. In the same region, the noted explorer-adventurer Christy Palmerston followed closely the local Aboriginal tracks. On Christmas Eve 1882, his party soon struck a large nigger track that brought us to the Beatrice again,
nigger track, huh?
At the junction of a nice running creek. Crossed this creek and followed another large nigger track up a high spur, on top of which we got a lot of turkey. E88s left this track, crossed some very steep ridges and small running creeks, and then struck another nigger track just running in the opposite direction to the one we had left. While on this I caught a glimpse of Battle Frere, bearing northeast by east. It was almost facing me, and the track going in that direction. We then crossed several running creeks. Then struck another nigger track which passed through many old camps and over level country. 55 Contact between blacks and whites was inevitable as frontiersmen followed watercourses where they were likely to meet large numbers of Aboriginal people. On many occasions the progress of the interlopers was silently observed by unseen Aborigines. Gilbert confided in his diary that, although his party had not seen any blacks, it was likely that they were within a few yards of his camp closely observing every action. 56 It is quite clear from explorers' journals that they knew they were trespassers on Aboriginal land. Belief in the superiority of European land use allowed explorers, and later settlers, to ignore the proprietorial rights of the original occupants. The initial contact between blacks and whites was fraught with tension. The experience of seeing a white man for the first time frequently resulted in bouts of screaming, shaking and perspiration. 57 In some instances Aboriginal people took these pale-skinned people to be the spirits of ancestors. 58 The situation was exacerbated when mixed signals were conveyed. Encountering a large group of some 100 blacks in the vicinity of Gregory River, William Landsborough and his party tried to indicate that they had peaceable intentions but nevertheless refused to allow them to come too close to the camps. In response to the European usurpation of their land, these particular Aboriginal people seemed fully bent on having them off the ground. Landsborough noted that from his previous knowledge of the blacks they could easily have driven them away on horseback, but this he did not think necessary. 59 It was not normally the practice of explorers to fire on Aboriginal people whom they encountered. 60 They usually treated blacks with caution. Aboriginal people were similarly cautious. Armed resistance to the explorers, as Reynolds
It's funny
points
how
out,
this book is putting blacks and Aboriginal people, but it's kind of coinciding, showing you who, what the Indians are. But they're saying Aboriginal, same thing, right? Same difference, right?
Was less common than might have been expected, owing no doubt to prudent weighing of costs and benefits. 61 When Aboriginal people displayed aggressive behavior, the usual response from explorers was to charge the group on horseback, firing shots in the air. In 1847 Kennedy's party was confronted by blacks on the Barcoo. They made a great noise as if to frighten us but ran away when I turned my horse and charged them. On gaining the open ground they still continued to follow us and becoming very noisy and the rear man being in danger. I desired 4 men to gallop towards them and fire their pistols over their heads. 62 Another explorer, Gregory, used similar tactics. He noted, the object was only to procure our own safety and that with as little injury to the blacks as possible. 63 Europeans often had an ambivalent attitude to Aboriginal people across whose land they trespassed. While they feared the possibility of an attack by the Aboriginals, they welcomed their presence because it indicated that water was near. Kennedy recorded in his diary in October 1847 that he had observed 2 natives, which convinced me that there was water in the neighborhood. 64 Leichhardt also noted that towards sunset we heard, to our great joy, the noisy jabbering of natives, which promised the neighborhood of water. 65 Aboriginal people were similarly ambivalent in their relations with white people. While anxious blacks often deliberately steered explorers away from their camps, they obviously appreciated that white people, like themselves, needed water to survive, and were prepared to share this resource. Aboriginal traditional skills were vital to the success of exploration parties. All appeared to include at least one Aboriginal member. These party members were of invaluable assistance in locating bush food, tracking stock which had strayed from camp, liaising with local Aborigines, and locating Europeans who became separated from the main party. For instance, on several occasions Charlie, an Aboriginal guide, found members of Leichhardt's party who had become separated from the main group on its overland journey in 1844-45. It was noted on October 20, 1844, this morning, at 9:30 Messrs. Roper, Hodgson, and Charlie, returned with John Murphy and Caleb. They had strayed about 12 miles from the camp, and had fairly lost themselves. Their trackers had to ride over 70 miles, before they came up to them, and they would certainly have perished, had not Charlie been able to track them. 66 Previously uncontacted blacks were also of assistance to exploring parties. On Leichhardt's 1846 expedition, 2 native blackfellows went in search of the missing stock, the 2 companions never having been on a horse before, mounted with caution. 67 Exploring parties were often given directions by local Aboriginal groups which they encountered. A member of the Burke and Wills party noted in a field book that on the Cloncurry, they passed 3 blacks, who, as is universally their custom, pointed out to us, unasked, the best path down. This assisted us greatly, for the ground we were taking was very boggy. 68 Aboriginal people appeared to know a lot about white people before they actually arrived in the district, but European stock was a source of much wonderment. As Henry Reynolds points out, the noise, size and speed of horses was vastly different from any animals Aboriginal people had previously encountered. 69 Nevertheless, they seemed to adapt with amazing rapidity to horses. When the explorer Landsborough was assisted by 2 local Aboriginal guides to find water, he allowed them to use a horse which they took turns riding. The oldest of the 2 liked riding so much better than walking, that he made his young companion walk the sick most of the way. 70 It is evident that Aboriginal people grasped the opportunity to adapt new technology whenever it was appropriate. When the Harm exploring party encountered friendly Aboriginals on Cape York Peninsula, they gave them some fish hooks and a half horseshoe which, it was reported, they appeared to prize very much, as it would make them a very fine tomahawk. They having one made out of an old ship old-fashioned in the usual tomahawk style. They appeared to notice any axes, buckets, and billy cans. 71 Europeans who pushed into inland Australia in search of suitable grazing country saw the land as undeveloped, but this was clearly not the case. Aboriginal people, through their land management practices, had created and changed the environment to suit their particular needs. Their utilization of resources was not random and haphazard.
Not random.
While it may not have conformed to the European definition of agriculture,
they know no agriculture. They got it from us.
A systematic and managed use of the environment which was ecologically sustainable, having been refined through the experience of thousands of years. Chapter 2 The arrival of white people. Included in the cultural baggage which Europeans brought north with them was a commitment to taming the wilderness, a desire to impose a higher form of civilization in an empty land. Despite the evidence before their eyes, settlers saw little of value in the Aboriginal use of land, which was based mainly on hunting and gathering activities. The means of production were communally owned, in marked contrast to the concept of private ownership in the Western system. It is hard to imagine 2 forms of land use which would have been more difficult to reconcile. Indeed, it is unlikely that a minute's thought was ever given to such an option. Instead, Europeans strode off into the unknown, firm in their convictions that God, international law, and science were on their side. By 1840, European settlers, moving principally from the New England district with their flocks and herds, began taking up land on the Darling Downs. The virtues of the region had been revealed by explorer Allan Cunningham in 1827. He recorded in his diary that it was gratifying to observe the range of luxuriant pasturage. Its plains, rising downs, open woodlands, valleys, and even elevated forest ranges which would be accessible to our most extensive flocks and herds. 13 years elapsed before brothers Patrick, Walter and George Leslie rediscovered the region, and close on their heels followed other opportunists, including the Hodgsons, the Russells, the Campbells, the Archers, the Gammies and the Gores. As Maurice French has noted, the opening of the Downs to pastoral settlement was achieved with great rapidity by men of considerable wealth and social influence. 2 By 1844 there were 26 stations on the Darling Downs running 154,000 sheep, 11,337 cattle, and 349 horses. 3 Nearer the coast expansion was less spectacular, but nevertheless by 1854. Squatters had pushed northward to Port Curtis.
squatters.
By the time Queensland was separated from New South Wales in 1859, the Archer brothers were in the process of establishing stations in the Rockhampton region. 2 years later, the Kennedy Pastoral,
South Wales. When you hear that, you'll think it's the fake England, Europe, but you just heard them say it, Hampton. You know we're talking about America. I just showed you Queensland, right in Georgia. Don't let them fool you. Pay attention.
District was thrown open for selection, and this was accompanied, yet again, by the frenzied surge of squatters and capitalists as they rushed across the continent in search of the most suitable claimable land. Edward Palmer, who took up Canopy Station between Normanton and Glenorrhy in 1864, recalled, "The settlers were like a great advancing army, confident in their numbers and strength, and so they advanced into the unknown land and left the rest to fortune, for huge tracts of land were expropriated by those eager to make a profit from pastoral pursuits." The Leslie brothers claimed what was deemed by contemporaries to be a modest amount of land, the whole heads of the Condamine from Toolba upwards, some 14 creeks, on the Maranoa River. Alan McPherson took up over 400,000 acres. In the Warrego district, 4 Europeans controlled 7776 square miles of land, and in North Gregory, 3 others held another 8,261 square miles. 5 stations of 4,000 square miles were commonplace in the more remote parts of the colony. The spectacle of the stream of white people, accompanied by their peculiar livestock with thin tails, big ears, horns, and huge size, was obviously a source of great apprehension and anxiety for the original occupants of the land.
Yeah,
while it is likely that some of them had knowledge of Europeans. In advance of their physical arrival, square miles were commonplace.
Mind you, y'all hear what they talking about? They said the strange people coming. Who are these strange people coming? They say the strange white people. Well, only could they be strange if they come into a land where they ain't never been there before, right? Make this make sense. Pay attention, guys.
The more remote parts of the colony. The spectacle of the stream of white people, accompanied by their peculiar livestock with thin tails, ears, horns, and huge size, was obviously a source of great apprehension and anxiety for the original occupants of the land. While it is likely that some of them had knowledge of Europeans in advance of their physical arrival, it was nonetheless a time of extreme tension and uncertainty for all concerned. As pastoralists moved into the Burdekin district in the early 1860s, they were under close surveillance by the local residents. In that particular region, the first indications of the European presence were 4 stray head of cattle.
So they just told you right there, all these people saying whatever they want to say. It's telling you in 1860, which was not that long ago, right? In 1860, these people were first there. This is the first time their presence was even known in the area. Okay? Pay attention. We talking about like late 1800s. Anything after 1850 is late. Let's go.
Morrill, a shipwrecked sailor who had been living with the local tribes for 17 years, was away from the district at the time, but on his return he was given a detailed description of the animals, which he realized were 3 cows and a bull. 6 soon after this sighting, others in the group watched.
Right. They said they weird animals
white and black
with
men
the tails.
on horseback began shooting Aboriginal people near Cape Upstart.
Hold on.
This too was described in detail to Morrill.
Listen.
They explained to me about the saddles for
They said the black men on horseback came shooting an Aboriginal. Who we talking about? We talking about them black natives, right? We talking about the frontiersmen, the pioneersmen, the homesteaders. Pay attention.
Sit in the stirrups, bridles, guns, smoke, and the noise it made when fired.
Not a damn one.
I explained.
He told you their first arrival.
Which surprised him much. 7 after this, Morrill received almost daily reports of the white people. There were 2 white men and a black boy constantly in the neighborhood where I was, the black boy being a great favorite among the gins. 8 next he was advised of a large number of cattle on the river which drank all the water in the hole, leaving the fish gasping for air in the muddy residue. 9 eventually the Aboriginal people with whom Morrill had lived for so long helped him to locate a shepherd's hut on Inkerman Station, from where he made his return to white society. Morrill's Aboriginal colleagues were in a better position than most others to understand the implications of the permanent arrival of Europeans in the area. Before leaving, he told them that the white men had come to take their land away. They always understand that might, not right, is the law of the world, but they told me to ask the white men to let them have all the ground to the north of the Bert Eken, and to let them fish in the rivers, also the low grounds they live on to get the roots ground, which is no good to white people, near the seacoast and swampy Point 10, but Europeans were not in a mood for negotiations. In other districts they knew they had the advantage of might if not right. Many of the northern settlers had previous frontier experience, and as they moved into new areas they brought with them the expectation that Aboriginal people would give trouble. The Leslie brothers, for instance, informed their parents that on their northern expedition they were taking plenty of firearms for fear of the blacks. 18 months later the frontiersmen were trying to push their way in too. Downs property they never allow Aboriginal people to come about the station or hold any communication with them except it be with a gun or a sword. 3 years later the message was even more explicit. After the theft of sheep it was noted that we gave them the blacks what they will not forget in a hurry. Walter Leslie later complained that our shooting here is mostly confined to the rifle and pistol used in defense of our men's lives and property. Point 11 Despite the assertion by some historians that white men seldom needed to go armed on the frontier. 12 The reality was, as Reynolds and others have pointed out, I keep telling them, brother, they don't hear me though. Evans argues that the gun was as much a fact of border life and pastoral expansion as was the sheep, the cow, or the cabbage tree had. Point 14 As the frontier moved north, so too did the wave of resistance put up by Aboriginal people. One observer noted that in the Maryborough district every acre of land was won from the Aborigines by bloodshed and warfare. Point 15 In 1875 George MacGillivray wrote from I ain't hear nobody say nothing about a native yet. Here 40 miles y'all heard native for the past 6 years and my wife and family also reside here. We have been in continual danger of being massacred by the blacks. In fact, during the past 12 months they have them good old Moors attacked 3 different times, and in the last 2 all but succeeded in surrounding the place in the nighttime quietly, and no doubt would have done so and killed every soul on the place, as all of us men were out after the cattle and horses and only our women and children at home. They were however kept at bay by a large greyhound. Point 16 feet has been estimated by Luce and Reynolds that trying to make you get lost in the story, and their allies died by spear and club in Queensland between 1840 and 1897. Point 17 2 incidents in particular received considerable attention in the colonies. The first was the massacre of 9 members of the Fraser family in 1857 at Hornet Bank near Tarim, and the second, 3 years later, was the slaying of 19 members of the Wills household at Cullen Laringo near Spring Shore. These events evoked a campaign of indiscriminate attacks on large numbers of Aborigines. Armies of settlers and detachments of native police converged on the scene, which resulted in hundreds of blacks being slaughtered. Moore Dillon wrote from Orion Downs. Who came? The natives? Desire for vengeance took possession of prior to this, we heard no mention of a native. Is that correct? We didn't hear nothing about a damn native. Who would the native police be, guys? Listen. Hard. Let's take that back. At Hornet Bank near native police converged on the scene, which resulted in hundreds of blacks being slaughtered. Moore Dillon wrote from Orion Downs. An uncontrollable desire for vengeance took possession of every heart. Words of execration and pity fell alike heedlessly upon the ear. The blood of strong men and helpless women, of gray-haired men and unconscious infants spilled wantonly on every side, spoke to every heart in a language words could not interpret. 18 historian Noel Luce notes that these 2 events left indelible scars on Queensland's race relations. For many years after, Europeans sympathetic to the Aborigines or critical of the settlers' treatment of Aborigines had these 2 incidents flung at them to prove the innate murderous treachery of Aborigines. 19 No one knows exactly how many Aboriginal people were killed on the frontier resisting the occupation of their land. We can however say that there was a massive death toll which was the direct consequence of European colonization. Contemporaries believed that for every white person killed, between 6 and 20 Aborigines bit the dust. Archibald Meston claimed that in the north, as many as 50 Aborigines had been slaughtered to avenge the killing of each European. 20 The duration of Aboriginal resistance and frontier conflict was determined by a number of factors, including the nature of the country, the Aboriginal population and the type of economic activity in the region. As a generalization, Aboriginal resistance was more pronounced in the north than in southern districts. Noel Luce detected a general pattern of conflict in North Queensland. Most commonly, the Aborigines avoided the small number of pastoralists and their employees first moving into their tribal areas, sometimes almost completely, for periods of a few months to as long as 2 years. After this initial period, clashes occurred with increasing intensity until overt Aboriginal resistance was broken by the combination of squatter and native police action. 21 The actions of the Queensland Native Mounted Police, a paramilitary organization, legitimized frontier violence. This force consisted of armed Aboriginal troopers under the command of white officers. A native mounted police unit was initially set up in what is now northern New South Wales in 1848 and was used almost immediately to put down black resistance along the Condamine and McIntyre rivers. The troopers were particularly well suited to the task as they combined the skills of both black and white, the ability to live off the land and track opponents in the most difficult country, and the ability to ride and shoot. As Evans has pointed out, the native police removed much of the local tribe's environmental advantage in the struggle for the land and prevented the terrain affording them any secure refuge. 22 The native police force was relatively small, 23, but highly mobile, and it moved with the frontier. Its troopers gained particular notoriety for its attacks on groups of blacks encountered on patrol. As Aboriginal resistance was broken in one area, the services of the force were solicited by settlers in more remote regions. By 1862 there were 2 camps in the Kennedy district, one at Bowen on the Don River and another on the Bowen River. The number was increased to 3 with the arrival of a further detachment on the Upper Bird Ekin from the pacified Wide Bay and Burnett areas. 24 In 1868, the Don River contingent was transferred to Dalrymple. This evoked bitter complaints from Bowen residents, who maintained that they were left abandoned and unprotected. 25 While clearly economic considerations were an important factor in the occupation of land, 26 many settlers could justify the dispossession of the Aboriginal people by resorting to the scriptures. A common contemporary view was, the British people took possession under the divine authority, by which man was commanded to go forth and people, and till the land. God had not allowed for nomads. To the blacks, the continent was merely a common. They bestowed no labor upon the land. Their ownership, their right, was nothing much more than that of the emu or the kangaroo. 27 In contrast, Police Magistrate W. H. Wiseman had lived amongst Aborigines for 30 years and was of the opinion that they were more sinned against than sinning. 28 Confronted with limited resources, the newly formed Queensland government in I-860 formulated land legislation which favoured pastoral activities. Legislators were keen to avoid problems which had emerged in other colonies, so the stocking of runs was made a precondition of the granting of leases. The system, which allowed the allocation of large tracts of land into the hands of relatively few squatters, was intended as a short-term solution. Closer settlement was viewed as the ultimate objective. Reflecting the views held by many at the time, the editor of the Queenslander wrote in 1875 that a great but not excessive desire to see cultivation flourish has always been apparent in this colony. All classes look to the cultivation of the soil as a means of increasing the production of the country, and of enabling it to support a larger population. 29 Defending fellow pastoralists favored treatment in the acquisition of land. Thomas Archer argued that these were the times when the cormorant squatter ranged at will over the face of the land. It said a pastoralist, right? So it says they favored the treatment in acquisition. So always everything going back to the religious confines from the Vatican, and they're trying to have rulership. Turning into profit for the community, and occasionally for himself, vast tracts of country that had lain waste and desolate since creation, and would but for him probably have continued so for centuries to come, for it is an axiom in the history of Australian settlement, to which there has yet been no single exception, that in the interior the squatter or pastoralist must precede the settler or agriculturist. 30. The typical northern squatter in the 1860s was an owner-manager who frequently had the backing of a sleeping partner, business house, or family. Member. 31. There was some company ownership of properties in the 1860s. J.G.
Remember the
McDonald
blending
on
of a
behalf of a
story.
syndicate took up a string of runs stretching to the Gulf of
Read between the
Carpentaria,
lines.
including Harvest Home, Carpentaria Downs, Inkerman, and Gregory Downs. J.M. Black, a partner with, and northern agent for, Robert Towns, applied for a series of runs, including Woodstock and Jarvis Field. 2. The preference for sheep, which had been evident on the Darling Downs, was maintained when squatters moved north in their search for new land. Nevertheless, there were some individuals who stocked with cattle from the start. Besides being relatively cheaper, cattle were more mobile, an advantage when the right of occupancy was bestowed on the first to stock the country. The fact that there was only a limited market for the product did not seem to be an issue. 33. Those who chose sheep were to find within a decade that foot-rot, fluke, lungworm, and speargrass rendered much of the northern area unsuited to sheep raising. By 1873 only 2% of the colony's sheep population remained in the north, compared with 9% in 1868. By the early 1870s it had been established that the northern regions were more suitable for cattle, and by the turn of the century almost half the state's cattle numbers were located in the north. Whether stocking with sheep or cattle, squatters faced substantial difficulties in their pastoral pursuits. Land legislation created special problems for squatters working stations in the more remote parts of the colony. For instance, pastoralists argued that the stocking clause in the Land Act 34 was particularly onerous, as in many instances sheep and cattle had to be purchased on the Darling Downs. Queensland Premier Robert Herbert told his mother that his sheep were by far the best flock in the north, having been selected on the Darling Downs, where the best sheep are bred. 35. The problem for northern squatters was that it often took longer than the stipulated 9 months to place stock on the selected runs. 36. The prospect of rent increases in 1866, at a time when wool prices were depressed, saw squatters petitioning the government for relief. 37. As conditions deteriorated in the industry in the late 1860s, numerous runs were abandoned. 38. In desperation, a correspondent calling himself 6 years in the North wrote to the editor of the Queenslander, challenging one single pioneer north of the Connors Range to prove that he has received 1 penny in return for the money he has invested, the labor he has bestowed, and the hardship he has endured. At the same time I undertake to bring a large proportion to show their money has been lost, their labor wasted, and their health impaired, and yet our paternal government insists upon doubling the rents and taking away protection. 39. In 1869 many squatters converged on the town of Springshore in a bid to find a solution to the problem. It was argued that an increase in rents would deter investment in the industry. The consensus among those present was that changes needed to be made to pastoral leases to attract investors into the industry. According to squatters, the most advantageous relief that the government could give was more secure and extended land tenure, with no increase in rents. If this was not forthcoming, the only alternative will be for pastoral tenants in this part of Queensland to abandon the country. 40. The editor of the Queenslander did not think that economic conditions were sufficient reason to warrant giving pastoralists special consideration. He believed, however, that better grounds could be found. He reminded his readers that pastoralists had opened up the country, and given that vast territory an immense value, which, without their efforts, would still be worthless, and a more selfish but yet perfectly justifiable view of the matter is, that the colony cannot afford to lose them now that they are here, and see a wide extent of country abandoned which, in the natural order of things, must, for many years to come, be either a land of flocks and herds, or revert to its original state, and once more become a wilderness. 41 While Butlin has noted the importance of British capital in the Australian pastoral industry, in North Queensland colonial capital seemed to be more important. Much of the initial capital appeared to come from Victoria, where people were escaping the prejudicial effects of land legislation on pastoral pursuits in that colony. 42 Consequently, the proceeds from the sale of Victorian properties were used to finance the establishment of Queensland stations. The Han family, for instance, sold its property. Collard to take up and stock Bluff Downs and Maryvale in the Kennedy district, and William Stenhouse, who took up land on the Clark River in 1862, had been on the land in Victoria. Some settlers were able to take up country using stock from their existing properties. For instance, Bidulph Henning in 1864 stocked a station on the Flinders River with 7,000 sheep from his South Kennedy station, and Charles and Tom Collins used cattle from their station near Hornet Bank to stock Spring Creek in the Cook Pastoral District.
All right, just so you guys can get a little bit, I'm not going to get into this whole book, but I wanted to, hold on, let me pull this back up. Where is it? Okay, here we go. Okay. We're going to read a little bit of the Emergency Relief Act, right? I should have pulled this up on the reader. The Federal Emergency Relief Act of 1933. I've told you guys about this 1,000 times. I don't care what nobody tell you, what they tell you about any kind of paperwork being fake or, this or that. I want you to understand what's really going on. This is the United States Code, right? Actually, let me drop the link. I'm going to see if this PDF, let me know if you guys can grab this PDF or not. I really want y'all to see this. Okay, let me see. Let me put it in the chat. Let me know if you guys can get this. Exactly. We ain't had no dang cows here. Bring a cow with the weird skinny tails. That's the funny part for me. I'm like, whoa. But yeah, grab this, guys. This is this PDF. I want you to make sure you can really check it out. Okay, this is so important. Just wanted to make sure I read some of this to you guys. Okay, so let me pull it back up over here. Another window. The Federal Emergency Relief Act of 1933, Section 721. Let's start there. Declaration of Emergency, allocation of funds of Reconstruction Finance Corporation at the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, approval of applications for loans by administrator, right? Section 723, Federal Emergency Relief Administration, creation, appointment, and administration, compensation, duration, and administration. Officers and employees, appointment and compensation, investigations, monthly reports of the administrator, grants to states, right? Terms and conditions, amounts, applications for grants and contents, certification of approval and application of Reconstruction and Finance Corporation, monthly reports of the governors, right? So on and so forth. Now, Section 721, the Declaration of Emergency. The Congress hereby declares that the present economic depression has created a serious emergency due to the widespread unemployment and increasing inadequacy of state and local relief funds, right? Resulting in the existence of or threatening deprivation of the consideration and number of the families and individual of the necessities of life, right? And making it imperative that the federal government cooperate more effectively with the several states and territories and the District of Columbia in furnishing relief to their needy and distressed people, right? This is May 12th of 1933 of the needy and distressed people. Okay, you can check this code out for yourself. I want to put this in the chat. It is imperative. They said it is imperative. This thing is copying weird. Let me see, because I want to get the whole thing in there. Okay, it is imperative. It still didn't take it. Hold on, guys, because I'm going to put it in the chat. Either way, it take me a second to get to it. That's what's going to happen. Okay, now let's try and copy it. There we go. Get back to the other window so I can put it in the chat. Yeah, it says meat is deteriorate the brain. Damn, that look like that link is too long. Okay, well you guys got it. It's just all right. This is understanding literally what is going on with this now. Let's get back to it. All right. Now, it says in 722, allocation of funds of Reconstruction Finance Corporation to the Federal Emergency Relief Administration and approval of applications for loans by the administrator. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation is authorized and directed to make available out of the funds of the corporation not to exceed $5 million. $5 million in addition to the funds authorized under Section 605A of the same title for expenditure, right, under the provisions of this chapter. Upon the certification by the Emergency Relief Administration provided in Section 723 of this same title, the amount of notes and debentures, bonds, or other such obligations with the reconstruction of the Finance Corporation is authorized and empowered under Section 609 of this title to have outstanding at one time increased by $5 million, $5 million, provided that no such additional notes, debentures, bonds, or other such obligations authorized by this subsequent section shall be issued except at such times and in such amounts as the president shall approve. Okay. After expiration of 10 days after the date upon which the Federal Emergency Relief Administration has qualified and has taken office, no application shall be approved by the Reconstruction and Finance Corporation under the provisions of Section 605A of this title. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration shall have access to all files and records of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation relating to the administration of funds under said Section 605A. At the expiration of such 10-day record period, right, the unexpended and the unobligated balance of the funds authorized under said section shall be available by the purposes of the chapter, right? It says that you can see that additional appropriations on this with Title 40, okay? Section 723, the Federal Administration Relief Act, with creation, appointment, administration, compensation, duration of administration. There is hereby created a Federal Emergency Relief Administration, all the powers in which shall be exercised by the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, referred to in the chapter as the administrator, to be appointed by the president and with the advice and the consent of the particular Senate. The administrator shall receive a salary. Hold on. Hold on. I think I went past it. Hold on. Yeah. The administrator shall receive a salary to the fixed and the president and not to exceed $10,000 and necessary travel expenses, so on and so forth. Federal Emergency Act and the Office of Federal Emergency Administration shall cease to exist upon the expiration of 2 years after May 12th of 1933 in the expenditure balance, so on and so forth. Okay. Office and the employees. Okay. Appointment and compensation. The administrator may appoint and fix the compensation of such exports, and their appointment shall be made in a compensation fixed without regard to the civil service laws or Chapter 13 of Title 5, and the administrator may in the same manner appoint and fix the compensation of such other officers and employees as are such necessary to carry out the provisions of this chapter. But such compensation shall not exceed in any case the sum of $8,000 and may make such expenditures, including expenditures for personal services and rent at the seat of government and elsewhere, and for the printing and the binding, not to exceed $350,000. Okay, as are necessary to carry out the provisions of this chapter and to be paid by the Reconstruction Finance Corporation out of the funds that are made available by the chapter upon the presentation of the vouchers that are approved by the administration. I showed you guys the other day how those vouchers, right? It's basically taken from the people's money, because they would get the promissory notes and then create and then build off the people, take and pull in funds and then return it back like they borrowed something, but they never had anything to put up front. So this is kind of the same thing as I see it, right? The chapter, let me see. The Finance Corporation, out of funds made available by the chapter upon the presentation of the voucher and approved by the administration and by the Office of the Administration designated by him for that purpose. The administrator may, under rules and regulations prescribed by the president, assume control and administration of any state or states where, in his judgment, more effective and efficient cooperators between the state and federal authorities may be thereby secured in carrying out the purpose of the chapter. Taking over the state, huh? Investigation. In executing any of the provisions of this chapter, the administrator of any duty duly that's authorized or designated by him may conduct any investigation pertinent or material to the furtherance of the purposes of the chapter, and at the request of the president shall make some further investigations and studies as the president may deem necessary in dealing with problems of unemployment relief. Okay. Now, monthly reports by the administrator. We can go past that real quick. Let's go to the grants. Grants to state terms and conditions amounts, right? Out of the funds of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation made available by the chapter and administration and authorization to make the grant of several states, right? To meet in the aid of meeting the cost of the furnishing relief and the work relief and the relieving the hardship and suffering caused by unemployment in the form of money, services, materials, and or commodities to provide the necessities of life to persons. Hold on, let me copy this for you guys. Hold on. The administrator is authorized. Hold on. Now y'all gonna see how important this is in a minute. Maybe y'all can't see it. I know nobody's paying attention to this boring old video, but those that need to pay attention will. All right, let me get back to you guys. Go to the other window. All right, there we go. That's right. Peas, Edward, peas. Now check this out, guys. Hold on. I have to put the rest in there once I get to the other page. Now listen to this again. I'm going to reread it so I can make sure y'all heard it. Okay. Now, which window was? I got 1,000 windows open, y'all. I'm going back and forth. I don't want to close that now. I'm trying to take my time. Okay. Let's start again, and then we're going to go back and continue. It says here, relief and work relief, right? And in relieving the hardship and the suffering caused by unemployment in the form of money, services, materials, and or commodities to provide the necessities of life to persons in persons in need as a result of the present emergency and or for their dependents, right? Whether a resident, whether a transient or a homeless person. Oh, dang. But they ain't taking care of no homeless people, are they? But they supposed to. Aren't they supposed to? Isn't that part of, the law when it comes to Title 15 that you guys are hearing right here? It's their responsibility to take care of homeless people. There should be no homeless person There should be no homeless person that is standing or laying out in the cold right now. None, not one. It's the responsibility of the people. Okay? All right, let me get back to it. Now, check this out. Of the amounts made available by the chapter not to exceed $250,000 shall be granted to several states applying thereafter in the following manner. Each state shall be entitled to receive grants equal to 1/3 of the amount expended by such state, right? Including civil subdivisions, and therefore out of public monies from all resources for the purposes set forth in subsection A of this section. And such grants shall be made quarterly, beginning with the second quarter in the calendar year of 1933, and shall be made during any quarter upon the basis of such expenditures that are certified by the states to have such made during the preceding quarter. Hold on, let me go down. It says that the balance of the amounts made available by the chapter, except the amount that is required for the administration and expenditures under Section 723, shall be used for grant to be made whenever from an application presented by the state. The administrator finds that the combined monies which can be made available within the state from all sources, supplemented by any monies available under subsection B of this section, which fall below the estimated needs within the state for the purpose that is specified in subsection A of this section, right? Provided that the administrator may certify out of the funds made available by this subsection additional grants to the state, right? Applying therefore to aid needy persons who have no legal settlement in any one state or community, and to aid and assist in cooperative and self-help associations for the barter of goods and services. You mean the people that if they can't afford it, they're supposed to be given these things? Is that what it's telling you? Listen. After October the 1st of 1933, notwithstanding the provisions of subsections B, right, the unexpended balance of the amounts that are available for the purpose of subsection B may in the discretion, may in the discretion of the administrator and with the approval of the president be available for grants under subsection C. The decision of the administrator as to the purpose of any expenditure shall be final. The amount available to any in one state under subsections B and C and of the section shall not exceed 15% and the total amount made available by such subsections. Okay? It says application for grants and contents. Any state desiring to obtain funds under the chapter shall, through its governor, make application therefore from time to time to the administrator, who is a fiduciary. I'll keep telling you guys, look up what is a fiduciary. Each application so made shall present in a manner that is represented by the administrator information that is showing in one, the amounts that are necessary to meet the relief needs to the state that are during the period that are covered by such application, and the amounts available from the public or the private sources, right, within the state and its political subdivision and private agency to meet the relief needs of the state, and the provision made to assure adequate administrative subdivisions, and the provisions made for suitable standards of relief, and the purposes of which the funds requested will be used. Being a state, what is a state? An e-state would be what? Your trust in a state. Would that apply to you? Since you have an e-state, you are energy, a commodity, and since all debts going along with this act of 1933 says that all debts belong to who? The United States, right? Certification of approval of application to Reconstruction Finance Corporation monthly reports of the governors. Right, the administration upon approval a grant in any state shall so certify to the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which shall accept upon revocation of the certification by the administration, make payments without delay to the state in such amount and at such times as may be prescribed in this certificate. The governor of each state receiving grants under this chapter shall file monthly with the administrator and in the form required by him a report of the disbursements made under such grants. The grants are what? For the people, the grants. What is a grant? Something you don't pay back because what? It's given. State and governor define. As used in the foregoing provisions of this chapter, the term state shall include the District of Columbia, Alaska, Hawaii, Virgin Island, Puerto Rico, and the term governor shall include the commissioners of the District of Columbia. As we went over before, I've told you these are the states that are governed by the United States Court. These particular areas, right? Any other is a subdivision. All other 50 are subordinate to anything having to do with it. These are individual state. You are in your own state, right? Just like you have your own state constitution. Just like if you have your trust, you have a constitution basically for your trust, governing you and yourself, right? Grants to public agencies, right? Nothing contained in this chapter shall be construed as precluding the Federal Emergency Relief Act from the making grants for relief within the state directly to such public agency as he may designate. Short title, this chapter may be cited as the Federal Emergency Relief Act of 1933, going along with the Banking Act of 1933. You guys got to look it up. I've told you about it many times. It talks about, let's look at this, Chapter 10 in Title 5, the executive departments and the government offices and their employees. Now listen at the things that they are governing and they are administrating. What is an administrator? I just showed you guys the other day. An administrator is what? A servant of the people. They have taken a sworn oath to, be for the good of the people, right? To take care of the people, to be, the proper administrator and fiduciary, which is handling them appropriately, so on and so forth. Now listen to their position. Title 38, pensions, bonuses, and veterans relief fund. Common carriers. Title 45, the railroad. I told you guys and showed you guys the railroad pension. If you have any family member that was in the railroad, you should be receiving their pension. See Title 46 in shipping, compensation for injuries, government employees. See Chapter 15 of Title 5, executive departments of the government officers and their employees. Controller of the currency, controller of the currency. Title 12, banks and banking. Oh, banks and banking, that's a part of controlling of the currency, going into what? The treasury, right? The treasury direct, which your bonds are drawn off of. What would that have to do with banking? Banking are what? Fiduciary administrators of what? Your banking system, which is what? Your bond. I don't know if y'all understand that, but let's get to something else real quick. I can probably go over one or two more things. Hold on. I'll make this quick. I'll tell you what a deed of trust will look like. No, that might be too much. Let me go back. Let's do this. Hold on a second, guys. I'm gonna show you something. I might just do this one document and be done with it. Okay, let's look. I'm gonna show y'all a little bit of something on equity. I was in the TikTok today, and the guy was going over it. I wanted to get up and show this document, but they had too many heavy hitters up on the panel. They ain't let me up. But let's get into it real quick. Let me check with the chat and see if anybody came in. I know with all the ignorance and drama, some of my people just ain't got time because they too intelligent for it. Let's see. Yeah, they crooks. It's straight up crooks. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Right. You are right, lady. You are right. If it come from the ocean, it's real. Yeah. That's true. Y'all talking about food. Let me get out the chat. Okay, let's get back to it. I'm gonna finish this document. Well, I want to read a little bit of this document before I get out of here, rather. I'm going to start right here on Article 3, right? This particular document is Constitution and statutory provisions that are involved. Constitution and statutory provisions involved regarding a case. Let's just read some of it. Section 2, the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and the treaties made, or which shall be made under their authority, to all cases affecting the ambassadors, or the public ministers and counselors, to all cases in admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and a citizen of another state, between the citizen of different states, between citizens of same state claiming land under the grants of the different states, and between the state, the citizens thereof, the foreign states, the citizens or the subjects. So that means that they talking about everybody, right? Let me see if this is showing. Make sure I got the right screen up. Okay, I do. Okay, I do. Okay. All right. Now it says, let me go down. Now, listen, in all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and counselors, and those in which the state shall be a party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction, and in all and other cases being mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, both as to the law and to the fact. Law and fact, not statutes, not codes, none of that. We're talking about law and fact. Okay? With such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall make. The trial of all claims except in cases of impeachment shall be made by jury, and such trial shall be held in the state where the said crime shall have been committed. But when not committed within any state, the trial shall be at such place or places the Congress may by law have directed. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of free speech or of the press, or the right of peoples peacefully to assemble and to petition the governor for redress of any type of grievance. And that's in bold. Petition the governor for any type of grievance. The people have the right to do that. Anyone has the right to do that. Amendment 5. No person shall be held for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless or on a presentment or an indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land of naval forces or in militia. When in actual service in time and war, to put into the jeopardy of the life of the limb, nor shall they be compelled in any particular criminal case to be witnessed against themselves, nor deprived of life, liberty, or property, nor deprived of life, liberty, or property. A person cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or their property without the due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. What will private property be? Well, don't you own you? Aren't you the controller, the ruler, the everything for you? So if you're controlling you being in a state of property, because what you were created or made into property when you were born, right? So you, in order to control that property, in order to control that and being able to be the person to be compensated for that, you have to be the controller of that said property, right? Right. You get it. Y'all got that. Let's read a little bit of Amendment 14 here. Hold on a second. You're way up. Okay. Amendment 14, Section 1. It says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. What makes you subject to the jurisdiction? Oh, a birth certificate. Being registered under the market and going under the stock system. Okay. That's the only way. If you're having a home birth, you wouldn't be registered, right? Jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state therein that they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or the immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property. That's all in bold again. without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. Everyone should have the equal protection of the law within its jurisdiction. That would be, what's the jurisdiction? That would be the state of your state, right? This thing moving so slow. Hold on a second. Again, I was like, listen to the national emergency. Okay, so remember we're reading about the national emergency, right? All right, let's get into this a little bit. United States Code Service, Title 1 through 54, Title 50, War and National Defense, right? Chapter 53, Trading with the Enemy, making you the enemy, putting you on paper. Hold on a second. Claim to property transferred to the custodian, right? Notice of the claim, the filing. What did I just tell you? You have to have what? You have to claim the ownership of said what property. We read that in the other book. It was telling you that about claiming your property, right? Sale of a claimed property or time of war or during national emergency. Well, didn't it say that we're in a state of national emergency since 1933? So that said property is being used and traded for funding and solicitation. So if you're not the person that's controlling, who else is? The people that you allow to control it when you help them by creating those securities I keep telling you about, right? A, in general, any person not an enemy or ally of the enemy claiming any claiming any interest, right, or title in any money or other property which shall have conveyed, transferred, assigned, delivered, or paid to the alien property custodian. The custodian, what is a custodian? The person that's taken care of, right? Or seized by him, her, under and held by him, or by the treasurer of the United States. Oh man, this might get too deep for you. I'm gonna have to say this for my private class. I'm about to get up out of here, guys. I appreciate everybody that came in. I wanted to give you guys a little bit more information, but I said it would be short. I want to definitely make sure that I am. Kahi, brother, you know what? I ain't got no word, but I appreciate everybody that came through. Peace, love, and bliss to everyone. You guys have a great one. Knows how it says United States, not United States. Yes, exactly, brother. Because they only have that little those little 6 areas that they can have anything to do with. We ain't got, that's the only thing. They ain't got nothing to do with us. It ain't got nothing to do with us. Literally nothing. All right, guys. Peace, love, and bliss. I'll be putting some of this information up on Patreon over the next couple of days, guys. So you'll be able to go there and get some of these links. I've been having a problem getting the links to attach over there. I got a couple of drafts, stuff that's supposed to be on my page. They're sitting in drafts, but appreciate you, Rodney. Appreciate you. I really do, brother. So yeah, we're gonna make sure that we do that. I'll have that information up hopefully in the next couple of days. Yeah. Peace, love, and bliss, guys. I'm out.